Hey guys, Crypto here with a new YouTube video. This one is going to be specifically about a interesting topic that has clearly gotten a lot of attention here on Twitter. As I said in a tweet a couple of days ago, this video is not going to make a lot of people very happy. I think it's going to piss off a lot of people, and it shouldn't, because the reality is that in these markets, dips at this stage of the game are really just opportunities, but some people don't see it that way. A lot of new investors and traders here, I feel, that have just gotten into the game over the last few months and don't quite understand how cycles work, and so they take this stuff personally. But this all kind of stemmed from a tweet that I made a few days ago, which is displayed here. My guess is that this washout is probably finally the beginning of the end of meme season we've seen over the last couple of months. Now, we've been seeing memes kind of go crazy since like December, January, so it's been a little bit more than 2 months. It's been a good quarter, at least I would say, that memes have been kind of going crazy. I believe Pepe was the first one that really caught my attention. I think that caught a lot of people's attention. Pepe was one of the first, and then after Pepe we had a slew of other meme coins. Dog with hat, I'm not sure if that came before or after Pepe, but Dog with hat, probably the most recognizable meme coin in the space right now, I'd say. Then you have others like, I guess BONK came before Dog with hat, actually. Of course you have DOGE, and you have a few others that I'm going to be talking about in this video. There's a few that have now made it to the top 100 coins by market cap. In other words, a few meme coins have had absolutely incredible rises over the last quarter. However, you have to understand that nothing in this space, no matter how good or how bad or whatever it may be, nothing in this space will go up without seeing a certain level of pullbacks. And that's just normal and that's just healthy. And those who've been following me or watching my content for a while understand that that's totally just part of the game. Those who can recognize that will be able to take advantage of it, and those that don't understand that will unfortunately probably get caught up in the hype and the mania and not make necessarily the best decisions. So this video is going to talk about altcoins specifically. Big focus of it is going to be meme coins, because meme coins right now are the leaders of the altcoins. We have a lot of altcoins from prior cycles and a lot of altcoins in general that just aren't doing too much. You have a few that have kind of stood out, INJ being one of them, which I'll talk about in this video as well. And then you of course have the meme coins, which have been kind of stealing the show over the last few months. Of course, Solana meme coins, and then now you have base meme coins, but we're going to talk about those meme coins that have broken into the top 100 by market cap. Those are the biggest ones. I think that we're going to be seeing a bit of a Altmageddon, as I like to call it, or in this case, a massive correction across the board on memes, but not just memes, alts in general. But I specify memes specifically because they have run the hardest and they will therefore probably fall the hardest. And it won't be every meme coin, of course, but I'm going to talk about the majors specifically, and they will generally, I think, represent the general altcoin market as a whole pretty well. So I'm not saying that these memes are dying. I'm not saying that they're going to zero. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm only saying that they're due for a correction, I believe. And I want to make one thing clear, because I don't typically talk about memes, and I haven't spoken on these memes in the last 4 months since they launched. And I'm not one who has been calling for their downfall for the last 3 months either. People have been calling for meme cycle tops for months now, and they have, but I have not been doing that, because I've recognized that these coins, just like anything else in this space, when they have momentum behind them, they can run for a long period of time without significant pullbacks. The market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent, is like a famous quote, right? So these things, when they have momentum behind them, are very, very difficult to anticipate tops for. So I have not been one to say that meme coins will top. I've never stated that before until very recently. And when I say top, I mean an interim top, not the final top. A lot of these I think will continue to go on to make new all-time highs at the end of this cycle after Bitcoin breaks 100K. But for now, I think that they are due for a bit of a correction. I think this correction will initiate a rotation back into Bitcoin and majors for the usual large cap, mid cap, small cap rotation we are used to, meaning I think that attention is going to shift back to Bitcoin and majors here. I think a lot of people are a little bit emotionally invested in these things, and you can see that from some of the comments here. We have one here, think you may be off. This wasn't merely a meme season. It's been and continues to be the main cycle trend. I don't really see any logical reasons for it to not continue so long as you remain in a bullish trend. So over here, calling memes the main cycle trend. And when I point out these comments, it's not necessarily to call anyone out. It's just to kind of show you guys the prevailing sentiment right now, right? That memes are the main cycle trend. Now, Bitcoin, the #1 crypto asset in the space, nope, that's not the main cycle trend anymore. Now it's meme coins. All the coins that actually have utility, of which there are not really many, but those that do, all the coins that had prior hype, the AI, this, that, nope, none of that is important. This is a meme cycle. That's the sentiment here. Meme season, haven't memes been pumping since check notes, the bear market. Sure, more attention grabbing for now, but meme coins are constantly pumping out 40+% gains a day. Guys, this is not something that's sustainable. Yes, memes have been pumping out crazy gains, but for every winner, there's a loser. And these 40% gains are mostly paper gains for most people. Of course, yeah, we're talking some memes have done thousands of percent of gains. But again, for everyone that's making 1,000%, someone's losing their money on that as well. So there's no free lunch winners. There's winners and losers here. And these types of pumps don't last because people take profits. Here's another one. Wouldn't hold your breath on it being end of meme season. Might slow down for a bit, but it will be back long before any blow off top in Bitcoin. Solana's low fees have made this cycle clearly different when it comes to memes. Anytime you hear this cycle is clearly different, when it comes to memes especially, that's a little bit of a red flag. It's meme super cycle. There's another one. Love to see people calling for an end of meme season. People really do hate memes, man. Memes are here to stay. Meme coin super cycle. This idea of a super cycle is probably like the epitome of people that don't understand market cycles. Super cycles are just secular bull markets, but even in super cycles, they're followed by massive corrections. Anytime you have what is being referred to here as a super cycle, it's just a larger bull cycle of a larger degree, and those are always followed by larger corrections, which I've talked about in the past as well. We can actually see here on the post engagements here, the quotes. You can just read the quotes. Most of the quotes of my posts here are mocking it more than anything, except for this one. This one is nice. End of the meme season be a blessing to utility coins. Okay. This guy, the dog with hat, obviously a dog with hat fan. This guy, the Solana casino never closes. Anytime you hear never, that's not a good word to use in this space. 300K followers can't read the market for his life. Says Alfie, the extremely serious investor, says that 300K followers and he can't read the market for his life. We can all agree on one point, the dog with the hat is a major now. I do agree on that. I would consider it a major for all intents and purposes. It's in the top 100 and I don't know what rank it is, but I would consider it a major meme, like it's one of the top memes. I agree with that. This guy shilling Popcat. You're going to see legend traders miss what is happening with meme coins this cycle. Another one. L take, by the way. So yeah, you can see the general sentiment is pretty defensive when it comes to anyone calling for a correction on memes. In fact, we saw another one of my buddies, Benjamin Blunt's, actually talk about dog with hat. And some of the reactions he got were pretty funny. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so here is Benjamin Blunt's, and go ahead and give him a follow. He's an excellent trader, kind of same methodology when it comes to Elliott waves that I use. So take a look at his content, and he actually shared that he expected dog with hat to hit $1 to $2, right? And this was when it was trading at 353. Just said that, I mean, you can literally see in the chart, he has a correction, and then he has literally another massive advance to $8+. So a bearish chart in the short term, but he's not saying that it's going to zero. Looking to rebuy bags down around $1 to $2, right? So the responses to this tweet, he's highlighted some of them here, so I'll just go over these. But I remember reading this and I saw the responses and I said, this is a top signal more than anything that I've ever seen. But the definition of cope, hoping people who made life-changing money round trip it back to Earth because you missed it, or fudding because you got stopped at miles back and are seething watching it go up and to the right. Hat stays on. This guy right here, Elliott wave theory, that's actually pretty funny. This guy right here, this is what marijuana does to your brain. This guy, so this was one of my favorites. Man thinks he's getting 1 to 2 whiff. Laugh my ass off. It ain't all about TA and imaginary waves and lines, brother. Study Colts, study hats. I was reading these and I was just laughing to myself. Like, these are literal top signals. When you hear people saying that we can't get a correction after what is essentially like an insane rise from pennies to $4, $5, I mean, that's insane. And then to say that we can't get a pullback and we can't get a healthy correction, this is what a top looks like. Of course, we'll take a look at the charts here. And lo and behold, we hit $2, okay, just the other day. So that actually was the top at $4.92. I'm going to take this off log screen. You can see we came down and tagged $2, $1.96. Now, Blunt's had a target of between 1 to 2. And we'll talk about more further in the video about where I think this is headed. But again, anytime you see that kind of defensive, like, anger at the idea of a pullback, it's usually an indication that people are hyped up on emotion. That's one of the top signals that we look for. So I haven't seen that type of defensiveness, that type of anger towards a pullback, or that type of a belief that we're going up only. I haven't seen that in a long time. And we were getting whiffs of that, no pun intended, at the highs here, and we've started a correction. Now, I'm going to talk more about this, but just to recap on Bitcoin before we dive into the altcoins that I'm going to cover in this video, just so you guys have a little bit of context, we'll take a quick look at Bitcoin here. If you've seen my recent video that I uploaded on Twitter, the one that I posted on the 15th of April, I just talked about Bitcoin and basically lower time frame price expectations. And just to give you guys some context with where I think Bitcoin's at right now, I do think that we're essentially in a range here. And I do think that we will probably see a little bit of a move up here based on the metrics that I'm seeing to at least this level. And then at that point, either come down or continue up based on the way that the metrics look, leaning more towards this move down and then a base to form here before ultimately continuing to the upside. So this is the primary thesis on Bitcoin right now, right? So with this context in mind, remember what this is: a move up to about 69K and then another leg down. This is going to play into what I'm talking about here with a lot of these alts. And if you want to understand the logic and the reasoning behind this, I made a 20-minute video that's on my Twitter, and it's going to talk about why I expect this, the logic behind that. I'm not going to cover it in this video because this is primarily about alts. Go ahead and watch it if you're curious. Now, with that out of the way, we're going to jump into the altcoins. We're going to start with Doge, and I'm going to talk about Doge the most in this video. I'm going to cover the other major alts too, but Doge is the one that to me is kind of the most interesting. And I say that because Doge is what I would consider, and a lot of the guys who are into these newer meme coins probably won't agree now because they're not making money on Doge, they're making money on Pepe and WIF and all these other ones. But to me, Dogecoin is like the OG of meme coins. To me, Dogecoin is the Bitcoin of meme coins, if you want to call it that. This is, in my opinion, like the blue chip of meme coins. Doge has been here longer than any of these other coins, has been here for multiple cycles, and has performed extremely, extremely well since inception. Because of this, many people view Doge, just as I do, as kind of the OG meme coin. They view it as the Bitcoin of meme coins or the blue chip of meme coins. And there is a almost general consensus that Doge is probably going to head to $1 this cycle. And there's almost no disagreement about that. That's a very widely held belief. And I will say right off the bat that I agree with it 100%. I have no doubt in my mind that Doge is going to break prior all-time highs of 75 cents in this cycle and likely head to $1 plus. However, because that sentiment is so strong and it's been prevailing so much, there is also an idea that the bottom on Doge here is in, and that we're not going to see anything in terms of a major pullback, and that we're likely going to head up to $1 here soon. That is where I am going to start this video talking about Doge on the higher time frames, my expectations for it, and why I think it's kind of a good indicator for the rest of where I think these meme coins are headed or the rest of the altcoin market right now. Now, you have a lot of altcoins that look structurally similar to this. That is, they've completed a major impulsive movement off of the lows, and this was back in 2020. They've now corrected significantly. They've put in a nice base. They've now made a nice move to the upside. And Bitcoin is now sitting at new all-time highs, or just under new all-time highs after breaching them. And the idea is that the consensus is that now that Bitcoin has broken all-time highs, alts are going to continue on to their all-time highs. And that's going to happen for certain alts, but we're going to get washouts along the way. And some alts are more poised to handle those washouts, and some alts are less poised to handle those washouts. And those of you who've been here for more than one cycle are familiar with the idea that we see rotation typically in these cycles from majors to mid caps to small caps, with memes kind of being the tail end or the last to really take off in most crypto cycles. And in this instance, in this particular situation, we've had a period of time where memes have kind of dominated the space. After Bitcoin has broken all-time highs, rather than majors, mid caps, small caps, and then memes taking off, we've seen memes kind of dominate. And so because of this, people now believe that this cycle is different and that memes are now going to be leading the cycle, and that they're going to be, as some have said, a super cycle, or this is going to be a meme cycle. And in my opinion, I think what's probably just happened is that memes have kind of taken off here. We're essentially seeing like this meme cycle being the tail end of a rotation that ultimately is about to shift back to Bitcoin for Bitcoin's parabolic advance to 100K plus. And then from there, I think we get our large cap rotation again, and then we get our mid cap rotation again, and then I think we get our small cap rotation again, and then I think we get the final and the biggest meme coin rotation, meme coin mega finale, okay? And this is where I think we're going to see Doge to $1 plus and everything that people are talking about happen in meme coins now. And this is where I think the meme coins that are now going to see massive corrections will eventually recover from and eventually go on to make mind-numbing gains once more, similar to what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months. But essentially, I believe we're here. We're about to go into a rotation of Bitcoin, as evidenced by, as many of you are aware, the slaughter that alts absolutely faced over the last week or so as Bitcoin dropped 15% and many alts dropped 30, 40, 50%. I think that's an indication of a shift back to Bitcoin, and then we'll go through the normal rotation. I'm going to share with you guys a chart that my good friend on Twitter, CJ900X, that's his Twitter handle right there at the top left corner, has published on Twitter. And I recommend giving him a follow, guys. Some of the cleanest charts. If you're like OCD like me, then you love the way that his charts look because they're so freaking clean and sharp. I just love the way that they look. So the cleanest charts, some of the best technical analysis, a guy that I chat with about charts almost daily. And we've discussed Doge months back when we were trading here at 7 cents. Doge has been here since 2015, has already seen through its lifetime at least 3 to 4 80 to 90% retracements. There was one here. There was one here. I believe this was like an 80 to 90. It's on log scale, so you're not going to be able to tell right off the bat just looking at it, but I believe this was an 80 to 90% retracement. This was another one, if I'm not mistaken. This was another one. And every single time it has recovered and ultimately broken new all-time highs. But what we have here is key accumulation zones before those parabolic advances. Okay, we had one massive parabolic advance. We had another massive parabolic advance, and I think we're going to have a third massive parabolic advance at the end of the cycle. And before each of these parabolic advances, we saw periods of accumulation, okay? And you can see a pattern here. A significant low is put in, a significant high is put in. The lows are taken, price moves back up to the high, tests the mid-range as support, and then breaks out and goes on a massive run. This run back in 2017, it's hard to even kind of quantify it, but it was a move from like 0.002 cents up to essentially 0.009 cents. I think that's a 400 to 500x if I'm not mistaken, okay? We then went through an 80 to 90% correction, put in a key low, put in a key high, took the lows, tested the mid-range, and then impulsed again. And this move was one that most of you probably have a better recollection of, since I know a lot of you just joined in 2020 and 2021. But this move took Doge from a fraction of a penny up to 70 cents at the highs. And so this in and of itself was, I want to say, a couple thousand X, if I'm not mistaken, on this move here to the upside. And we've now seen an 80 to 90% retracement. But what you want to point out here is that we have a similar range that is now formed between our key lows and our key swing highs. And some of you may recall I've previously said that I'm interested in buying Doge for the first time under 5 cents. I haven't bought Doge since, guys. It's not something that I've ever held in my investment portfolio before. I'm not a big fan of meme coins myself in terms of an investment perspective, but I have said many times that if Doge goes below 5 cents, I'm buying a boatload. A move below the range lows is what you would look for next if we were going to replicate what we saw in prior cycles, and then a move to the highs of the range and then a breakout and parabolic advance. Now, what we've seen on Doge this cycle, though, was we have not breached those lows, okay? From the chart that I just shared with you guys, this is the range that is depicted, okay? And you can see that we never actually took those lows. We fell just shy of them, broke out to the highs, okay? And now, again, the idea is that people believe that we front-run these lows, that we're now headed to 75 cents plus for a massive run on Doge. And I've been hearing calls for this now for months, right? I've been hearing calls of Doge is headed to $1, Doge is headed to $1. It's almost unanimous or universal that the belief that Doge is going to go to 75 cents plus to $1. And again, I agree with that. I just think that it's not necessarily headed there yet. And I'm going to talk to you guys today about why. So I always talk about looking for impulsive movements off the lows to identify when the start of a next major uptrend is going to start. And you can see here that thus far we don't quite have that. We have potentially an impulse, a correction, and then another leg up. But thus far this is a three-legged move. It's a low, it's a high, it's a higher low, and it's a higher high. For a proper impulse, we need a low, a high, a higher low, a higher low, and then a higher high. And that gives us an impulse. That's a series of higher highs and higher lows, or in other words, an uptrend. So we don't quite have a macro uptrend yet on Doge. We do have 3 legs up, but this is technically still in a ranging environment. And if I go ahead and zoom out a little bit more to the monthly chart, you can see here that we have some key levels. I'm going to mark up this chart as I would if I'm staring at this blankly, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the higher time frames first, in this case the monthly. I'm going to mark off key levels. You can see all these monthly candle closes above this level. We had a monthly candle close right here, kind of some consolidation, and then we had a breakdown, right? So what are some key levels that we can mark off here? Well, the major point of consolidation is always an important one. So I can go ahead and mark off this. You can see that after we broke down, this area acted as resistance, so we now broke back above it. So this so far looks pretty good. We can also mark off this level here, okay? And then we can also mark off these highs here, because this is where our candle closed and we rejected here, right? So this is a prior area of resistance, as can be seen. We've technically now flipped it to support, okay? So technically this looks good so far. And one could argue that we have a breakout and retest here, okay? Now, for other reasons that I'm going to talk about here shortly, I think that this is probably a distribution top, and you can actually see that we are chopping about it right now, okay? I'm I'm going to go into lower time frames, and this is where things get a little bit interesting, but technically you can say that we have a range breakout. But if we can't hold this and we fall back inside the range, then we have a fallback inside. And you can see here on the chart that I just showed you guys that every other time that we've rejected the range highs, we've made it back to the mid-range. Happened here, hasn't quite happened here yet. For now, we're still at the range highs. This could be a rejection on higher time frames, or it could be a breakout and retest. I'm going to talk about why I think it's a rejection. But if we fail to hold here, then where do we look for next? We look at the mid-range, and I'm going to go ahead and mark that off here. That's going to be at about 9 cents, okay? And again, historically, every time that we fail to break out here or rejected here, we have come back to this mid-range and tested it before continuing up. Now on the lower time frames, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting. In the lower time frames, we have a structure here, another range right here as well. At the highs, a smaller range, but a range nonetheless. And you can see we have a key swing high, we have a key swing low, and we took the lows, we took the highs, and now we're chopping back inside the range. A key that I want to point out here is that we have a very similar structure to what Bitcoin looks like right now. Now I'm going to go to Bitcoin, and let's compare these structures, and there's some key distinctions here that I want to point out. And here is the Bitcoin range, okay? And again, let me mark off the Bitcoin range. A couple of differences here, right? Number one, we have a key swing low here that remains untested. Doge has tested that low. Our highs have not been taken either here on Bitcoin. Thus far, we have two different ranging structures, okay? Now remember on Bitcoin, the expectation right now in the short term, and this comes back to what I said at the beginning of this video, that this is relevant to the conversation here. The expectation on Bitcoin, at least in the short term, is that we push up to at least these highs and get into this cluster of consolidation, which you can consider an area of resistance that we broke down from, right? And then I've previously said that if we don't take these lows that we've built up now, we're most likely going to come up to test this region, and then it's possible that we come down to take them after. Now I want to show you guys what happened on Doge when Bitcoin broke down from the local highs at 70K, came down to this level here. It actually held and made a higher low, but Doge fell significantly deeper. And just like Bitcoin has this kind of point of breakdown or area of resistance that's now been formed, so does Doge. And for Doge, that level is going to be this region right here. And so the idea is that much of the altcoin market is going to mirror Bitcoin. If Bitcoin falls, alts fall. If Bitcoin rises, alts rise generally. The only difference is that when Bitcoin falls, alts normally fall harder, and when Bitcoin rises, alts typically rise harder. In this case, Bitcoin had a drop of about 14%, whereas something like Doge dropped about 35% from those same levels. So now you can start to see how alts, especially the ones that are more volatile, whatever Bitcoin does, they mimic it, but they're higher beta, so they do it bigger, right? So here is Doge, and the interesting thing about Doge is that we've actually taken these highs, okay? We haven't taken these highs on Bitcoin here, and that's a key distinction, and it kind of pertains to what I think is happening here on the higher time frames. And that is that a lot of coins like Doge, I think, are forming distribution tops, whereas I think Bitcoin is forming an accumulation bottom. And again, I've talked about how I expect Bitcoin to take these lows, but ultimately build up for the next leg to the upside to take us to 100K plus. Whereas a lot of these alts, I think, have put in their highs and are ultimately building up for a bleed to the downside as opposed to a move to the upside. Again, we talked about how the mid-range on Doge is at around 8.8 cents. That's this black line here. So just to give you guys an example, push up along with Bitcoin here on Doge to the red zone. If we fail to breach this and we do reject from here, what we essentially have is the likelihood of another leg down along with Bitcoin is significant. And if that happens, Doge is going to at least take these lows here. We're already down to about 11 cents at this stage. We're currently trading at 15, but not far below that, depending on how much lower Bitcoin goes. Doge probably continues to bleed. Again, at least to the mid-range, right? What's key here is that if Doge loses this mid-range, then where's the next step? The next step is these built-up lows that remain untapped. And again, when I talk about things like this and people are like, how is that possible? There's no way Doge goes back under 5 cents. Again, you have to keep this context in mind of where we're at on the higher time frames. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Doge chart here. This is Doge on the higher time frames. And this kind of goes back to what I've talked about in Bitcoin before in terms of downside potential and what's okay and what's not okay. But this is a very big move to the upside, a very clean 5-wave move. Technically, a coin like Doge can do this and still be considered perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with that, as crazy as it sounds, because after a move up from 0.002 cents to 75 cents, it's a move of 68,719%. A retracement back down even 50% of that move and we'll just go ahead and take it off of this low, even 50% of that move is by all means very normal and healthy, okay? It's hard to kind of wrap your head around that in this space because the moves up and the moves down are so extremely volatile and so crazy, but a move back down to sub 5 cents is really just a 50% retracement of the last rise on Doge. And if I go back to the chart that I shared here, we've had plenty of those in the past. And this time is not different, folks. Anytime you get a rise like this, there's going to be profit taking, there's going to be distribution on the higher time frames, and there's also going to be reaccumulation. And that gives us a chance to accumulate at great prices for the next leg up. But you have to be patient and you have to be aware of these types of possibilities. And so Doge is one that hasn't really quite taken off here. It's kind of stuttering at the range highs. I think it's very possible, very likely. In fact, I will be positioning myself accordingly for Doge to make a move down to at least 9 to 10 cents. And if we can't hold there, and I think that there's a decent chance we may not, and again, I'll talk to you guys about that in a second as to why. And if we break down from here, the next stop is not the green zone. That has already been acting as support for this last leg up. This should get melted through and we should go for these resting lows, okay? That puts us back under 5 cents. And if we go there, I'm loading the truck up. If we don't, it's fine. If we do, I'm buying a ton of Doge. The reason that I think that this is actually a very likely move to make, even with as bullish as Bitcoin is by taking a look at the Doge Bitcoin chart, which we'll do next. So this is the Doge Bitcoin chart, and it's a big part of this puzzle, guys. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here on Doge Bitcoin. Those of you who've been in the space have seen this time and time again with any coin that you look at. It's a fairly common phenomena that we see here in this space, that we get these sort of massive alt pumps that get fully retraced against Bitcoin. On Doge, it's happened more times than you can count. You can see here we had a 400% rise that ultimately bled back down. We had here a 1,100% rise. Again, this is against Bitcoin, right? So 1,100% rise that fully retraced. Here we had a 7x rise against Bitcoin that fully retraced. And most recently, which is the run up in 2020 from sub 1 penny to 75 cents, we had an 8,300% rise, or a 83x. That has not yet been fully retraced, and that may not get fully retraced, but that hasn't even yet retraced 50% of the move. As we can see, greater than 50% retracements of these moves are the norm, okay? So this is where Doge currently sits, and the Bitcoin structure looks similar to the USD structure on the lower time frames, and that's kind of the way that I expect this to play out, to be honest. You have here our point of supply or resistance. We got that leg up. This is kind of akin to the move up on Bitcoin to 69K. And then if Bitcoin flushes for these lows, we get the flush down here on Doge to the lows, probably pop back up for a retest of these lows. But if we fail to break back above here, which is what I think is going to happen, then we continue our bleed down to the next major area of support. Okay, so I'm expecting a bounce on Doge Bitcoin off of this level. Okay, and that's where this bounce comes from. But following that bounce, the expectation I think that most will have is that we're going to continue on the new highs. And what I'm proposing here is that there's a decent chance that we fail to break back above and we continue to bleed lower. Next area of support's here in yellow, and below that is where it gets interesting, okay? Below that is where I'm interested in Doge, and that's the giant green zone here, okay? Now, how do we reconcile a 4 to 5 cent Doge with a bullish Bitcoin that I believe is going to hit 100K plus in the next 4 to 5 months, right? In previous video, I talked about the Bitcoin cycle top, which if you haven't seen that video yet, there's a link to it right there. And that talks about my estimations for a Bitcoin cycle top before the end of this year. So how do we reconcile a sub 5 cent Doge with a $100,000 Bitcoin or higher? Just to give you guys an example of how that could very feasibly pan out here. If the lower time frame price action develops as I've displayed here, and we break down into the zone, and we lose the orange zone and we head down to the biggest area of support, the most important area of support or demand or whatever you want to call it in the green zone here, at the same time that Bitcoin's ramping up. Again, as Bitcoin ramps up, a lot of these alts are going to bleed into Bitcoin, right? Liquidity is going to bleed into Bitcoin, as we've seen over the last week or so with Bitcoin dropping 15% and alts getting absolutely slaughtered. You're going to see a lot more of that as Bitcoin recovers. If Bitcoin is the first to recover and makes new highs, a lot of money is going to shift to Bitcoin from these alts because there simply isn't enough money right now yet to go into all these alts, but you may get a bleed down. And if these areas of support are lost on Doge, then we bleed to the green zone. And just to give you guys an idea of how we get 4 to 5 cent Doge on $100,000 Bitcoin, if we bleed down to this zone, which again I think is highly likely, then at this level where we're at 0.0000004 Bitcoin, what this means is that if Bitcoin is trading at $100,000 by the time we get here, guess what price Doge is at? It's at 5 cents. If it's at 0.000005, that means that Doge would be at 5 cents by the time Bitcoin hits 100K. So the idea is that as Bitcoin moves up parabolically past 70K, past 80K, past 90K, it starts sucking in liquidity from the rest of the market. At that point, most alt pairings will bleed. And along with that, some of the USD pairings will as well. And so it makes sense to see this continue to bleed to the downside. Well, if we get here when Bitcoin hits 100K, thereabouts, that puts Doge at about 5 cents. So it's certainly possible. And for those who see this and say there's no way that this type of a move happens, let me remind you guys of the Ethereum Bitcoin chart that I shared months ago in the blue square here, okay? When no one thought that Ethereum would bleed like the way that it has, and when I called for a Ethereum Bitcoin target of this zone right here, which is again this area of demand, which we've now hit. Okay, this was shared back when we were in the blue square, and I basically called for a move down to the zone down here and then further revised it to here. And you can see here that I expect Ethereum Bitcoin to fall as Bitcoin enters its fifth wave, new all-time highs and aggressive price appreciation. This was shared back in November of 2022, guys. So this was back when Bitcoin was, I want to say, under 30K. And I said that this pairing will fall as Bitcoin rises for the fifth wave, which we're now very clearly in, to new all-time highs. And then Ethereum Bitcoin will bottom and then rally and break out. So the idea was that we'd see near full retracement of this last rally on Ethereum Bitcoin down into the green zone here. And you now finally have people on Twitter recognizing it and saying, oh, we're probably going to go to 0.03 Ethereum Bitcoin. Everyone kind of agreeing that this is probably a likely target, okay? And we call this back when no one thought it was likely, and probably a lot of people laughed and scoffed at this chart, but here we are 50% lower, and we're almost at that target. So if you think that these ideas are ridiculous, I'm telling you, I've seen it all before, and I'm talking from experience being in this market for the last 7 years, especially when a chart has had a move up the way that Doge has had on the Bitcoin pairing, like we see here. When you see this type of a massive, massive rise, a 50% retracement, that's nothing, guys. A 60, 70, 80% retracement against Bitcoin, it's certainly possible. And again, if we lose this area of support, that's exactly where we're headed. And this is akin to the way that Ethereum Bitcoin is bleeding right now. That is something that I expect to see on Doge as well. By the time Doge gets to this green zone, even if Bitcoin's at 100K, will be at 5 cent Doge. So that's just an example of how it can certainly happen, how it's certainly feasible. And so that is Doge, guys, and I've shared with you guys my plan on Doge on the USDT pairing. Again, expecting a rejection on this next leg up along with the rest of the market, push down, and then probably tagging 9 to 10 cents. At that point, I think we'll probably see some relief potentially, but likely just reject and then come further down and continue to bleed as Bitcoin skyrockets. And again, I've talked about I expect Bitcoin to be back on its way up out of this correction in May, and the months after that should be very, very aggressive to the upside. So this is a breakdown here. Alts like Doge will try and break back up, but they'll probably reject as Bitcoin breaks out. So that is the idea for Doge here, guys. I think it's certainly possible that many coins like Doge are going to see pretty big wipeouts here in the coming weeks and months. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the other altcoins now that we've gotten Doge out of the way. Again, this is one that I plan on playing myself. Something like this, in the grand scheme of things, very, very healthy, and I will love to ride, and I think I'll get the chance to ride a Doge from under 5 cents to over $1 for a nice, easy 20x. I think if we can get sub 5 cents, I think this will be one of the most low-risk 20x's that we're going to find in the space, frankly. So that's Doge, guys. Let's go ahead and take a look at WIF next. And WIF is another interesting one that, of course, as you guys have seen, the passion, if you want to call it that, for WIF is pretty cool to see, but also can get a little bit negative at times, especially if you're calling for a pullback. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and talk about WIF, right? So this is the WIF chart, and if I take it off of log scale, you can see this absolutely incredible rise that we've had. Pretty significant correction this far. And just like the other coins like Doge, every coin at some point in its life is going to retrace 80+%, and it's probably going to have those types of retracements more than once. You can see here WIF is at a 70% retrace, and I'm not sure how far back this chart goes if it's capturing all the price history. This is back when WIF was at 7 cents, so I think it's honestly pretty close enough. This is probably the first major rally from which we pulled back 70%, and then we have not had a massive pullback since then. The current pullback off the highs is approximately 60%, okay? So we have not yet had an 80+% correction on WIF off of these lows here at 6 cents, and I do think that one is due, okay? And that's where this video comes in. We have very similar structure here to Doge that I just showed you guys, and Bitcoin as well. We have a range here at the highs, key swing high, key swing low, key swing high. We have what I believe to be a deviation above these highs, and then we have a breakdown, and these lows remain unswept. So just like Bitcoin, I do think that with the next leg down in the market, we'll probably take these lows. So if I zoom in here a little bit, what we have here is we have the leg down that happened yesterday, and we've had a nice recovery. And you have a lot of people already calling for the bottom to be in on WIF, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. In fact, what I see here is I see a very clean and clear point of breakdown. At the top of the range, you have this very clean, consolidation here at the highs that ended up breaking down. And so this apex is kind of the focal point of resistance, right? So just like Bitcoin, again, I'm expecting a leg up on Bitcoin. So if we get that, you expect most alts to make another leg up as well. Where does that put us? Right in this area of resistance, which if we fail to get back above and Bitcoin does get another leg down, so will WIF. And the next leg down on WIF should take us down to at least sub 180. And realistically, just based on key levels here, where would I look at to buy with? By the way, I am interested in buying with. I'm not saying that I will never touch these coins. I think that they have a lot of future potential. I just think it's time for a cool down. Again, a lot of these have made distributive tops after clear 5-wave impulses off of the bottom. You can see here on WIF, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These waves are a little bit distorted because we are in log scale. If I take it off log scale, they look a little bit more realistic here. You have a first wave, a second major pullback, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's our major third. There's our pullback, and here's our major fifth. So we do have a completed 5-wave move, and those are often followed by corrections that are relative in terms of time to the move that preceded them. So if this impulse took approximately 83 days to play out, then we'd expect the correction to be relative to that in terms of time. It's only been 16 days, right? So those that think that this was the bottom of the correction, I do believe this was just the first leg down, and the full correction will take longer to play out and to develop. So this is WIF, and again, initial target will be sub 180. We're currently trading at 264. So just from here, that's a drop of 30%. But if we get a push to the highs first, that's a drop of 45% to the downside that I still think that we're due for. And in terms of where I think we could potentially bottom, what I see here is I see a key push up and then this sort of grind up. That tells me that this level is of some significance here. We took these lows, and then we saw a nice, relatively strong move to the upside, an impulsive move, you can say. And then we have these untapped lows at the range, untapped lows. So essentially a sweep of all these lows, and then based on volatility, push down somewhere into this zone here is where I would say makes the most sense for a potential local bottom or a potential buy opportunity. In other words, I'm not interested in WIF, and I won't be interested in WIF, and I wouldn't touch WIF in terms of a long position or a spot position until we're back at around $1.50 or a little bit below that. At that point, this is where I think we have to pay attention. This could potentially be the bottom, or we could be seeing a deeper pullback. Again, down to here is about 77%. And again, 80+% corrections are the norm in this space. An 80+% correction would put us back under $1. I don't know how realistic that is, how feasible that is. It's certainly technically possible, and I would say even reasonable. I just don't know if that's what we'll get. I would be looking at a move down to right here at about 90 cents, just under $1, honestly, because we have this nice cluster consolidation here. This is an obvious level of support. This is at 47 cents. I don't really think that we're going to go that low. And then we have this little gap here, this little inefficiency, void, whatever you want to call it. So really either this green zone holds or we wick into this inefficiency. So that gives us a nice range, putting it all together for a potential bottom or wick zone or whatever you want to call it on WIF. I would say of anywhere between 75 cents to $1.40. That's a big range. So obviously it could be anywhere within that depending on volatility. And of course, this is a highly volatile meme coin asset, so we could get wicks fairly deep. I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that I think sub 180 is highly likely, and a move down to just under 150 is highly likely as well. So that is where I would place my bets, on a move under 150. Again, from a local top of 350, if we get that leg up, you're looking at an over 50% haircut on WIF. So this is more just to say that those of you who are in these coins, these meme coins that have had these monster runs that have literally run from 17 cents to $5 or 28x in the span of 2 months, consider taking some profits. Not financial advice, none of this is, but fair warning that when a chart looks like this, it's very easy to wipe away gains. And keep in mind that individuals that have bought at these levels at some point are going to take profit, and this is typically how it happens. So something else we can actually look at that kind of adds more confluence to this, we have bearish divergences here on the 3-day between these two peaks. We've had local top signals here already. So this just kind of to emphasize that as low as you think that we can go, we can probably go lower. Absolutely would not recommend doing any of this on leverage or anything like that if you're not an experienced trader. But in terms of spot, imagine if you had the chance to sell some spot here at 350 after a massive run and then rebuy at $1.50. That's a hell of an opportunity. I'd be excited for that. Unfortunately, with this video, I'll probably get a lot of people mocking it and getting upset that I'm calling for such a correction, when really they should be very excited to get the chance to double up on WIF at this time. So that's WIF, guys. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next coin, which is going to be PEPE. So this is PEPE, and PEPE has also had a monster run here as well. I actually had intended to long this one down here, but I missed the long. I can't remember what it was, but I forgot to set alerts and I missed the opportunity. This was a beautiful, beautiful long, and it has moved up about 11x or 10x in a span of a month. Wow, from 6th of February to 13th of March, and literally a month it went up 10x, okay? And now we're cooling off a little, and once again, we have a similar structure to what we're seeing on many of these coins across the board. Now, Pepe is a little bit different than Dog with Hat in that we do have a range here, but I think there's a chance that Pepe may go for these highs, okay? Pepe may go for these highs here before it actually crashes down. Structurally, we have here on Pepe very similar actually to what Bitcoin looked like at its 60K highs. You can see we have these series of higher highs in this sort of diagonal structure. We have a move down here. Let me go ahead and we'll take a look at Bitcoin real quick. Once again at the macro. So this is Bitcoin, and let me go and zoom out so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. And tell me this doesn't look similar, okay? So here's Bitcoin at its last 60K high. You had that 3 drives pattern, okay? And then you had a move back down to these lows, and then you came up and took the highs that tricked everyone, and then we came back down and bled, right? So Pepe is one that I can't necessarily rule out something like that playing out here to kind of solidify this top. Just like most of the rest of the market, thinking something like this and then a leg down, Pepe might do something like that, right? Might come back up to take these highs as Bitcoin did here at 60K, okay, before getting the more drawn out correction. And where do I think that correction is headed? Back down to this zone here. Now, again, there's a chance that we don't get this higher high and we just bleed down. So that's something to be mindful of. But ultimately, whether it's now or whether it's after we take the highs one more time, what I am expecting on Pepe is a move back down to this range, which at the bare minimum from this local high, which if we just come up and correct without getting the higher high, that is still a 70% correction of the downside. Here we don't see all the price action here on TradingView. It doesn't have all the price history, but if I go to the chart on Dex Screener, that kind of gives you an idea of the magnitude of the run that Pepe has had. Massive, massive run. We then formed again the nice base here, right? Which we consolidated from, deviated below, consolidated on, and then ripped up to take these highs. But again, on the higher time frames, all this really is a giant range, okay? So once again, we have the range highs, you have the range lows, okay? You have the deviation below the lows, you have the push to the range highs. Now, if we fall back inside the range, again, we typically test the mid-range, as was shown on Doge just earlier in this video. I'm guessing the mid-range is right around there, lines up with this cluster consolidation, but fail to hold that, and that opens up the doors to falling back into this zone here, which is the next major area of support. And so that is what I'm expecting on Pepe. Again, I think we could possibly hold here. Again, that's still a 77% correction from the high. So I think Pepe is one that could possibly hold here. And if we do hold at this cluster right here, then that could just be a wave 2 before essentially an extended move on Pepe here. So that's possible. But again, with the kind of Altmageddon that I'm expecting here, and with memes to basically take a backseat, I think, as majors and the original rotation goes about, I also can't rule out a bleed below here to take these lows into the next cluster consolidation and what would have just been a larger corrective structure here on the higher time frames for something like Pepe. And for those who again believe that something like this is impossible, keep in mind this move happened in 4 weeks. It can unwind just as quickly as it went up, especially when it's a move of that short of a period of time. But just to give you guys an idea, there's another chart that looks just like this, another famous meme coin that many of you may have heard of, that we'll take a look at next, that has done exactly this. And that meme coin is the next one on my list, which is BONK. And here's BONK, guys. And does this look familiar? Because if it does, it's exactly what I've just described happening on Pepe. That is a significant run up, local high put in, local low put in, consolidation, kind of base formed, move to take these highs, right? And you can see here that what followed after we took those highs was a bleed back down into this cluster of consolidation, okay? So if we compare this to the Pepe chart, this zone here is essentially the same as this zone here, right? So almost identical in terms of structure here. So BONK is essentially done what I think Pepe is gonna do. BONK is one step ahead, massive run up, put in a major high, consolidated, ran up, took the highs, ended up being just a deviation, and then came back down and retraced back into the origin of this move up. Now, BONK is currently sitting here, and I don't know if BONK is going to break down from here or base out and continue up. But my bet, just based on the market and everything that I've been talking on this video, is that BONK is also going to probably break down and bleed. And again, after a run of this magnitude, you have to understand that even a move back down to whatever the hell this is at 0.00000024, that's only a 50% retracement of this entire leg. So it's perfectly reasonable, perfectly feasible. And again, this is exactly the same scenario on Doge that takes us to 4 to 5 cents. You can see it here on BONK, which also has all these unswept lows, just like Doge. You can now see it here on PEPE as well. Again, PEPE might actually pull there, but if it bleeds down and it breaks down, you're looking at a move down to whatever this is. Basically, guys, the point that I'm trying to make here is that you can look at different alts and see this kind of coming. And this is kind of just a warning for people that are really high on alts right now, that it's never a bad idea to secure some profits, especially when you have a mega run such as these. Typical rotation in these markets is Bitcoin leads, which I think we're about to see. And you've got a little taste of it over the last week with the slaughter that alts just saw. If that isn't a warning sign to you, then I don't know what could be. But to take note of what's happening, Bitcoin's showing obvious strength while alts are being slaughtered as Bitcoin just sits at all-time highs. And I've previously talked about how this is the moment at which Bitcoin starts going parabolic. It's going to show extreme strength. So these types of corrections on these altcoins should not be anything that should surprise you. Bitcoin going to be taking the lead, alts are going to be taking a backseat, and meme coins being the dominant alt at this period that had the biggest runs over the last 3 or 4 months are going to see the biggest pullbacks as profit taking occurs across the board. Now, there's some alts that this is not going to apply to, some alts that have not made significant moves up, some alts that are still basing out or at their bottoms. And for those, this isn't as serious of an issue, in my opinion. Those will continue to base out and eventually take off. But there's also alts that have had massive runs like these altcoins, and those are going to probably be the ones that get hit the hardest because they have yet to make significant retracements, such as BONK with PEPE, Doge, etc. Now we'll take a look at a couple of other alts that are not meme coins, but that kind of represent what I think the altcoin market as a whole is going to be doing here in the coming weeks as Bitcoin gets ready to take off. Now this is INJ, a very, very bullish chart overall, and a very bullish asset that I think is probably going to do numbers. I don't know much about the fundamentals. I don't hold any myself, so I'm not particularly well versed in what injective is or does, but I do think that just based on structure, it's going to do quite well during this cycle. That being said, I do think we've once again hit a local top, and I think that this is probably a local distribution range within a larger accumulation range. But here is the injective chart, and I'm just choosing a select couple of alts that I think have very clean structures. There's a lot of alts and I can't cover them all, so I'm just going over the ones that have had these major runs that have very clean structures that I think we can use to kind of draw a blueprint off of. So this is INJ, and you can see a very clear 5-way move to the upside here. Now we have some choppy consolidation. We once again have a breakdown outside of this range. Now, 2 things can happen here, and this kind of applies to most alts that break down from these types of ranges. One is these can be just deviations, as we saw at the highs. Break above the highs, deviate, break below the lows, deviate. Or if we fail to get back above inside the range, then what these end up becoming are breakdowns. And breakdowns then lead to further bearishness over time and deeper corrections as this asset essentially resets or digests the prior impulsive move to the upside. Now, for something like INJ, again, if I go down the lower time frames, just based on lower time frame PA and what we expect to see here in the coming days on Bitcoin, you can already kind of see it perking up a little bit, but you expect another 1-to-1 leg that matches this size, and that's all I've done is I've taken this line and just pasted it here, and that pushes us up into this area of resistance, or kind of the apex of this consolidation before our breakdown from our range. So the idea is that if we fail to get back above here, if we reject here, then we're probably going to go for these lows, and that's again back down to around 1770. From here, that is a 45% drop. Okay, and again, this is to emphasize that even if Bitcoin does get that leg down from 69K and takes the lows, that's just a 15% correction. Most of these alts are going to get hit magnitudes of that. In this case, we're looking at a 45% correction at least. Okay, and then at that point, you're hoping we're going to form a base here and then ultimately get a reversal. So you're thinking reject here, come down, sweep these lows, get back up, form a nice base here, put in a higher low, and reverse. That's the ideal scenario that most people that are holding these alts are going to hope for, and that can certainly happen. I'm not ruling it out, and it's very, very feasible, I think. But it's also possible that this ends up drawing out into a bit of a larger correction. Now, INJ is a little bit nice in that it's one of the more bullish looking alts, and you can consider this the origin of this impulse. And if we're as bullish as we might be, then we could certainly see INJ be one of the alts that kind of holds here, bases out, and then essentially goes off on the next impulsive movement to the upside and continues this strong uptrend that we've seen. But it's just something to be mindful of. Not all alts look like this. Not all alts are going to be market leaders like Inge has been over the last few months. Not few months, but leading up to this correction, I should say. And so this is going to be how some alts react, and some are just going to continue to bleed further. If you take a look at Inge Bitcoin, it kind of supports that idea. Once again, we have a very key area here. It should have acted as support on Inge Bitcoin, right? This again is an area that we impulsed from. We should have acted as support. We broke below it, so it should now act as resistance. Prior support turned resistance, and we're now trading below it. Once again, we're in a little low time frame range. We had this strong breakdown just yesterday. We've now got the leg up. I'm looking for another leg up to the range highs. And then again, if that leg down comes on Bitcoin and Bitcoin moves down 10-50% and Inge moves down 45%, that means it's underperforming Bitcoin. That means it's going to fall back down. And this could be the start of a larger breakdown on the Bitcoin pairing, right? So again, this just tells me that a lot of these alts are going to potentially start underperforming Bitcoin in the coming weeks and months as Bitcoin essentially starts that parabolic advance to 100K plus. Where would I think that this may bottom out? Well, if we zoom out to the higher timeframes on Inge, you can just mark off key levels here, and it's very straightforward. Looking at the monthly time frame here, I can identify this bottom here that we broke down from, and then it failed to get back above until we closed above, and then we took off. So this is a very key level. I can also identify, okay, there's clearly some consolidation here. We have a bit of a gap here. This is like a consolidation range before the impulse. We've now broken below here, so it's possible that we then come down, right? So these are the local lows, rejection, come down here, something like that, and then base out and reverse up. So something like this is certainly possible here on Inge Bitcoin, and that's just essentially a healthy retest of what is essentially the macro like pivot, right? Oh, look, there you go. So you have this like macro level on the 3 monthly chart that we broke above that has not been retested, right? So retest that and then continue up. Very healthy when you look at it from that perspective. When you zoom out, it looks a little intense, but that's all it is, right? So if you look at something like this and then think about the USD pairing on Inge and how it could be seeing some weakness in the coming days, it makes a little bit more sense, right? Something like this with Bitcoin, let's say at 100K, what does that put Inge at? I believe it puts it at about $20 if I'm not mistaken. So where is that here? That's right about here, right about now. Bitcoin's not going to be at necessarily at 100K when Inge gets here, but that's just $20 if I'm not mistaken at that level. So again, healthy correction on Inge, but something to be mindful of. A lot of alts at this point in time, if Bitcoin gets another leg down, you're going to see 30, 40, 50% moves down across the board. And again, these are from some of these stronger alts. So if an alt like Inge is going to make a 50% move down, and I'm telling you that I think a lot of these meme coins are going to go 40, 50, 60% down, or 70% down, or 80% down, and you're kind of scoffing at that. This is probably just like a little reality check here about what's possible when it comes to downwards price action on some of these alts that have had insane runs over the last couple of months. CFX is another good one. I actually shared CFX a while back. Those of you may remember my altcoin video on CFX where I said I'm interested in buying 14 cents. I was looking for a move down on the CFX Bitcoin pairing down to the green zone, right? And what ended up happening is, I think that was back when we were at 17 or 18 cents. We ended up taking off and we actually went and took the highs, and I never got my fill. And I said, okay, too bad I missed it. If we ever come back down to that region, I'm interested again. Well, guess what, guys? I think I'm finally going to get that chance. It's crazy to see this actually take the highs and now bleed right back down. But again, with weakness across the board on alt, stuff like this is going to happen. And you want to be paying attention to those entries that you may have missed previously that may now be presenting themselves. And again, this entry is going to be such a beautiful one if we get it. But you have a very clean impulse off the lows. You have a massive correction. Went and took the highs, ended up being a fake out, now bleeding straight back down to this range lows. The origin of this move to the upside, this cluster of consolidation. This is a very sweet spot on CFX. And just like Bitcoin, just like all the other alts that we're looking at, same structure. We have a breakdown, we have one leg up. Hopefully we get a second leg up to retest that breakdown, and then continuation down along with Bitcoin. Again, this is all predicated on Bitcoin making a sweep of those lows and getting one more pullback before we're ready to go crazy on Bitcoin. But that brings us back down to around 18, 19 cents on CFX. And that's not too far away from the green zone here. So certainly possible that a lot of these coins that we're looking at are going to pull back a little bit deeper than most are expecting. That's it for this video, guys. If you guys liked it, please like and share. I really do appreciate it. Subscribe to my channel and let me know in the comments what you guys thought. And I will catch you guys in the next one.